Thank you all for being here today. And you have to understand with this subject matter we're talking about, the spiritual and metaphysical purpose for the 2012 events, the major changes spiritually, physically, and mentally, as well as how to properly, this is the key word, how to properly prepare for them is essential. And so if you're listening to this today or hearing this information, I applaud you, because it's a very rare soul that would take the time to do so and go past their fears and the, how can I say it, the reservations, to seek more knowledge before determining something so vital that can be important to your life. And that's why I do this. So whether there's 2,000, 200, it doesn't matter. It's important that the information and knowledge go out so you can be discerning about your choices. Now, just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I am, how can I say this, a hard and fast skeptic. Always have been, always am. But however, I've been psychic since childhood, and I figured, you know, God would not give a little girl this kind of a gift if it wasn't for the good of others. So, but I knew even then as a child, it must be learned from only the right sources, never the wrong. But I knew it's not good enough just to be psychic. It's part of the human component. You have 6 senses, not the 5 that are discussed in school only. And there is a reason we'll get to later why they only discuss those 5 and really don't want you to know about that 6th sense that you all have. But each one of us has it in varying degrees. Each one of us has it based on our past lives, and this is not a theory. I will not say or espouse anything that is theory out of my mouth because of that hard or fast skepticism. Usually I'll take a subject in detail, usually to tear it apart. You know, how can I say, oh, this is garbage they're feeding us. And so in the tearing apart, after a 5-year research and then watching to see if it really happens over and over again, then I'll think, oh my God, it's real. And then there's the only time you're going to hear me discuss this. And this particular subject matter is a subject that's exactly what I did in the early 1970s, even though I'm 27. In the early 1970s, I literally, how can I say, said, this is garbage. Let me get rid of this myth right away. So I tore right into it, scientifically, spiritually, and all those ways that I could. Now, we didn't have internet at that time, so I had to pull everything from geology, from the library, from every source that I could get, from all those sources, and then find credible sources on top of all that. After a 5-year deep research, I found that the information was valid and real. And this event is not something we must take lightly. We must never take this event lightly. Because you see, it's an occurrence that absolutely happens, natural to the earth and her flow and her pattern, every 100 to 125,000 years. It naturally occurs, and scientists have found that it has occurred at least 82 times in Earth's history. 82 separate times. Every 26,000 years, she likes to turn. She likes to turn over. Now you see, she turns over every day, day and night, on a 24-hour period as she travels around the sun. That's a pattern. The seasons are a pattern. And this is a little longer pattern. She's pretty big. She's been here 4.5 billion years. And she has her own things she just needs to do. So this is not uncommon with them finding it that 82 times she has made absolute geological changes to her north and south pole, and to her magnetic north and south pole. Scientists can easily clock at least 132 times, but that was just in the last 5 to 7 years that they found that out. That's how slow we are and how more advanced she is. Part of the cosmos, as she is part of the heavenly bodies, this Milky Way galaxies, she has her pattern with other planetary structures here throughout the cosmos that God created. They all have their little patterns. So this is just a pattern. So I will tell you, this is an auspicious time for you to be here. Because to come here as a soul, you have to be granted permission. You put in an application. And because this was a major event getting ready to happen, this was a big deal. Only few souls were allowed after the application. But souls were climbing all from all over the cosmos. Yes, let's go. Because you see, mankind on a spiritual level is evolving as well at this time from the 3rd level of awareness and, how can I say, density, to the 4th. And the earth is going to 4th, where she really belongs, and on to 5th. And some humans will go on to the 5th level or density. I'll get to more discussion about that later. So she's growing. She's making her growth as well as humans are evolving. So what ends up happening on the planet, though, is we forgot those other instances because, you know, they were like 26,000 years ago. But we do have all the geological proof, the scientific data, to show that modern man existed and predated the farthest, how can I say that, one of the finds that they found was a modern skull that predates Lucy. It's absolutely a modern skull, not Cro-Magnon and not Neanderthal, just like your own. We talk about the continents of Atlantis that was around for 50,000 years. They have all these traces, but they can't quite find it because we're a little young now. That civilization was gone after 50,000 years. Prior to Atlantis, we had Lemuria in the Pacific coast. Atlantis in the Atlantic, Lemuria, beautiful, huge continent in the Pacific. The mountaintops of Hawaii are actually the mountaintops of Lemuria. And that existed for 50,000 years. Both continents cross-linked each other and existed literally, how can I say this, for 25,000 years at the same time. And then Lemuria gone on her own pattern, and then Atlantis gone on her own. So it's essential that we have to understand we get misinformation from media constantly. You know the books you had when you were growing up in school? The same information is certainly not there today because it constantly changed. And history actually is his story about what they think probably happened and to assuage it for political gain or whatever it is for favoritism. So you have to remember to learn to be more discerning, which I am. So what I noticed was after that 5-year study, I was like, oh my goodness gracious. So I watched, because I'm so cautious, for 40 more years to see if those credible pieces of information scientifically as well as spiritually were actually coming to pass. I followed and followed, but I couldn't really talk about it because it's not a subject you could breach. I remember at my workplace back in the late 70s, I would tell people just casually, you know, there are going to be volcanoes that will be erupting in the United States. They said, oh, you're so silly, Antonia. There are no volcanoes in the United States. Oh. And then in 1980, Mount St. Helens, but she didn't erupt with lava. She just erupted with steam and ash and wiped out everything for 5 miles. Nothing existed. Blew every piece of timber off, every cabin, all life, human and animal, off for 5 miles, 5 miles surrounding her at once. Just overnight, just one day, because that was that natural process for that particular volcano. And so when I came to work, I didn't say, I told you so. I just sat back and I went, you know, kind of. So I realized, yes, these are pieces of credible information. And if we realize that sixth sense and tune it into the earth, I have something else that happens to me. In California, I have something that has always happened in 24 to 48 hours of an earthquake. I'll be sitting somewhere, sitting along, and all of a sudden, I'll feel like I'm falling off my chair, which is kind of interesting. And I know, sometimes even the intensity of the earthquake, what is going to, if that it will be happening and what Richter scale level it will be. Oh, that felt like a 3 or 4. Ooh, that's a 6. But I will just lose it for a second because we are all in tune, not only with the earth, not only with our electrical meridian systems that run through us, that all our senses on a soul level are connected as well to the cosmos. So I'm sensing and feeling. Now that's a heightened sensitivity. So that means everyone can develop that sensitivity or utilize it or understand and not be frightened of those kinds of sensitivities. And that's where you continue the knowledge. Even with your intuition, you must continue your studies, your growth, and be guided because there's so, especially today, there is so very much garbage out there. And so my point today with you is to make sure we go past all that garbage. And it's essential because, how can I say this, somebody has to show you and to understand, because right now it's a ripe topic. And I see them hawking ideas or hawking information that just isn't good or just isn't, how can I say it, proper. Now, this is what the average person does today in society. Just want to show you this little piece I was led to or guided to.
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be mine? Please won't you be my neighbor?
Isn't that lovely? Wasn't that cute? And you saw what was happening there. What you saw was people being totally apathetic to the events. That's a sad thought. This is exactly what we're doing today. Oh, it's normal. Yes, it's normal. You want to wash the car? You want to have a picnic? While the forest is burning, let's just go out and marshmallow roast, you know? Let's play volleyball. And let's go roll and walk and jog in the horrible weather. And this is exactly what we do. Now, this is, oddly enough, a PSA made in Canada. I was so proud of them. But the whole point was, it's a PSA about global warming, which, number one, is a lie that the elite have pushed upon you for several years. Yes, the planet was getting warm, but not because of global warming. Before she makes her turn, as she does, we'll get into later, through this portion of the galaxy, or the galactic center, that she does, and goes through that little hole, things get a little warm. Everything gets a little collectively warmer. Because all planets, they weren't honest. Every last planet is increasing its temperature as we get closer to that vortex called the galactic center to go through. So everything is warming up. Every single planet has gone up several degrees. So they didn't want to tell you, but they just said, how can we cover it up without letting them know and creating chaos and stopping the world that makes the money that we need? How can we do that? So they gave you this and then made you feel guilty about it. I'm not saying there's not pollution. There's not, how can I say it, rape of the land. That's not what I'm talking about. This small compared to what's really happening, which is a natural process from Mother Earth. So ultimately, as we move through here, you're going to notice that people around you really don't want to discuss it. Oh, that's not going to happen. And there's a real reason, because at 12/21, ultimately, we are December 21st, 2012. That date has been so carved into your mind. But we are abused with that date by the elite. It was never going to happen on that date. Okay, so that's important for you to understand. It wasn't meant to happen on that date. But what ends up happening is, I'll switch to the second slide here, which is the Mayan calendar. So everybody talks about this calendar. Now, the Mayans, actually the ancient Mayans, not the current today, contemporary Mayans, the ancient Mayans were brilliant. Our own calendar today is still not as, there we go, it is still not as precise as this calendar. There's a 0.09 difference between the Mayan calendar and our current calendar today. That's how accurate they were in that system. And not only that, they were very right-brain dominant, as you see, because it's very artistic and ornate. Not so left-brain linear dominated like we are in this Western society or Western world. So ultimately, you see not only were they right-brain aware because of all the right-brain creativity, that thing still is calculated today. But this is what society makes you do when you think, when you hear the word Mayan calendar. This is society. What do they say? You see the two people on the little donkey, and the other people on the side are just saying, oh, you know, it's terrible, that poor animal is being hurt with two people riding. And then they'll keep riding on their trail, and then other people will say, how cruel, we're letting his wife walk. And then other people, as they keep going on their journey, how stupid to let his wife take that ride alone. And then they get and walk beside. These people don't even know. Why would you let the society determine how you're going to think, act, or behave? That's the key. But what happened is society is controlled by the elite. So the date of December 21st is false. It was never going to happen on that day. In fact, a very dear friend that I spoke with before on a roster of very illustrious speakers on this topic, before the Norwegian Cruise Lines, they had a huge conference on 2012. Dr. Carl Johan Kalman is the foremost authority on the Mayan calendar, brought it forefront to the population in the world. He realized and calculated the date is incorrect. He calculated it is actually October 28th, 2011, because our calendar was changed. Gregorian, Julian calendars made that change happen. So are you. So it actually, we opened into that October 28th. Now the Mayans were brilliant because they had a system. They knew that there was a downfall of a great society, and then another one would grow again, a downfall. They become very prosperous, wonderful. They take over the world. They're brilliant in all kinds of knowledge. Monetarily, they own everything. And then that society comes away. And then a new society comes around again. But this society has been controlled by Western world, unfortunately, the entire time. So as we move on, this is important because it's still amazing to me today that we would still trust what we're being fed, a bill of goods constantly all the time, especially if you're listening to any mainstream media, because mainstream media is only owned by two people. There's only two portions, Reuters and AP Press. And it's owned by one guy who's controlled by who? The elite. But you see, the elite still want you to continue focusing on that date, because when nothing happens, it'll be a cry wolf. So you won't prepare. And they're thrilled. Because in a situation they know with this change that is going to be happening, there's too many of us. And so they have their own little mandate out here as well. On top of these natural events, the elite, that means that 1% of the world that own everything, all the banks, all the companies, all the corporations, all the politicians, all the world governments, yes, those, they're actually existing. When you hear the word conspiracy theorist, they make you think that they're crazy when they're giving you real truth normally and real data because they've researched it. So you should be suspicious right away. You should be suspicious about why they're not telling you about these events. They lie to you about everything else. We know about the Twin Towers. We know that was an inside job. We know that was all set up, or we should. There's plenty of information and data. To see more information about that, you should just go to Netflix of the documentary, what is it called? Uncovered, the truth behind the war in Iraq, and see more data, more information on that. But it was something they had planned back in the 70s. Again, they brought it up back in the 90s. And this is just their way to control us. If they instill fear, literally they can continue their mandates, which they've been doing quite so long. And they keep you busy. They keep you on the hamster wheel. All the games, all the little features and TVs and big things that keep coming out. So you won't focus. And then those credit cards, you got to pay for them. So you got to go to work, so you're on the hamster wheel again. And then they get you to do what they want. They collect all the gold and the money, which they've taken. So what ends up happening is you're still on the hamster wheel. Keep them focused. Keep them distracted. Yeah. Did you know that the elite have built more than 129 bunkers for safety in the United States, and that was 2 years ago. So there's more sense. So this is real factual information. I can give you all that data as we move on here. But again, what you're seeing or allowed to see is just the tip of the iceberg. What we want you to see here today, I want you to open to the reality of the situation. So I believe when you're prepared with knowledge, there's no fear. You just get in there and do it if you choose. Everybody has free will. And we're going to talk about how to prepare. Now, what's happening worldwide? I'm not sure if you're aware of these things, but we have all these issues happening worldwide today. Literally, this is just the nature side. I'm not sure if you're aware of the dead birds and fish that are being found all over the world in the last 3 years. In the thousands, all of a sudden they wash ashore. All of a sudden the birds fall in the thousands from the sky. And that's several places around the world. Now, two things are happening. They found sometimes there's a HAARP signature, especially when the birds are flying. A HAARP signature, which is a man-made device that the elite use to control weather. If there's a storm, they can crank it up to make the storm worse or turn it down, okay? And that's based on the work of Nikola Tesla. But what happens is we find that there's a strong, many times with the dead birds or fish, with the dead birds especially, a strong strike or HAARP signature that must hit a signal for their natural GPS inside. They have a migratory pattern that's encoded in their, how can I say it, in their nature. And so ultimately we see chemtrails, and nobody knows what those are, but there are all kinds of really good data and information on what those are, and they've been doing that. What those X's and W's and Y's in the sky are not natural. Those aren't clouds. When they first started spraying those chemicals, they were just stripes, and they looked too fake. So they started to make them with a chemical process that would now feather out so nobody would notice. But a jet trail stays behind a jet for 10 to 15 seconds only. It doesn't stay all day in the sky. And we found that there are a larger, literally copious amounts of aluminum, barium, and other carcinogenic, literally, how can I say, chemicals that are placed in that are being sprayed and are now being found in our ground soil and groundwater, as well as our water sources. Now we know that aluminum, especially the largest, is not good for anyone. That creates or causes problems with Alzheimer's and everything else. It's a cause that causes us not to function properly. But strange sounds. These huge sounds that sound like trumpets in the sky everywhere in the world. People you hear them taping. YouTube is wonderful. It gives free reign. Like, what is that sound? And they're calling the police and wondering what's happening. The police get calls everywhere in the
I'm hearing, looking out my window right now, hearing some strange sounds out there. I have no idea, like, it's coming straight out of the sky. What is that?
¿Qué es esa picha? Esa picha, güey. Conche tu madre.
I don't know if you can hear it because my camera has really bad sound quality because it's just a regular point and shoot, but I know I'm hearing, like, I don't know, it sounds really weird. It's kind of like a humming, singing kind of noise. I don't know, it's hard to hear, but here, listen. Like, I don't know where it's coming from. Like, I don't know what direction it's coming from, but I just started hearing it. I don't know if this is, like, related at all to the trumpets, as people would call it, but I don't know, I kind of think it is, so I don't know, but...
Did you feel that? I can feel it. Yeah. It's like earlier. I don't know. But it sounds like it's like, I don't know. I can actually feel it vibrating. Really? It's like this hum.
is interesting because it's like the Bible, the last chapter of Revelation tries to discuss it, but it's kind of cloaked in disguise. The trumpets, the sound of the seventh trumpet, just before the changes happen. I got to tell you, sometimes I feel like Noah around here, because like people, oh yeah, sure. But I'm just trying to say, I'm just doing what I'm told. And because of my spiritual connection, what I do, this is important that you understand this. Now we could go on, we won't go too far, because even here and everywhere in the world so far, there's not been one place that hasn't had these sounds. It's just that you might not have heard them. So spiritually, what we're supposed to do is be aware, wish those people, send the intention that they be able to find wholeness and heal from their losses, to be able to find prosperity once again. We need to do that and send that intention to them, as well as we need to prepare. If it happened to them and it's happening over there, we need to learn to prepare. So the earthquakes we've been hearing, I don't know if you know this, but in 2000 I was going to I'm watching all these scientific things, so got the computer and I'm looking at usgs.gov, and it shows a week's amount of earthquakes on the North American continent. And in those days it's like 200 something a week, you know, mostly in California, and it's normal. And then all of a sudden it started to creep to 3 to 4. Now there's 1,000 to 13,000 a week, just in a 7-day period in the North American continent, and places I've watched that never had them before. I kept watching 4.0s and 3.0s in Oklahoma forever. And have you ever heard about earthquakes in Oklahoma? But it would be constant. And then we see them on the West Coast, the East Coast, in Kentucky just a few weeks ago. All around, because the earth herself, she's preparing to move. She's moving, doing her natural quality. Now remember what I said about souls that were here, the ones that were allowed, all of you that are listening, if you choose. You were only allowed on the planet, because remember there's a copious amount of people from all souls, all from the cosmos coming like, oh, they're going to grow, plus the earth is evolving too, oh, let's go there. You were only allowed because on your spiritual list or Akashic record, or on the account of your life or soul existence, you had to have been through earth cataclysm before and excelled. Otherwise you were not allowed to be here at this time to go through it. That is why you were here. But each soul came lucky and thrilled because they signed in for it, and they have coded on a soul level where each one decided to be during these time of changes and what they would do. Some of them are just finishing off their little work, their studies and their personality and soul growth and doing what they need to do, and that'll be it for them. Others may change and find that they need to save a child before that child falls off something. That child ends up being a mayor or a governor later on. That's their job. And others are here to rebuild in community.